redistributing some grade levels in the other school buildings. So Pleasant Avenue will become pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade. Warren Street will become an intermediate elementary school, housing grades 2 through 4, and the Johnstown Junior High School, for all practical purposes, back to Johnstown High School, would be housing 8 through 12. And just a review of the timeline that we followed, you can see everything that's kind of crossed out in front of you. We did follow this timeline pretty carefully. We're at February 16th tonight, where we're going to ask for your vote to open a nice building. And finally, final proposal, I just put this in the presentation because this will actually end up on the website at some point. Okay? And that in itself is my recommendation, pretty simply put. And I'd like to open it up for any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Will there be a physical differentiation in the building and the high school between the 8th grade and the high school 8th or 9th grade?
Yep. So the 8th graders, right now, the plan is, and according to our floor plan and all of our instructional, planning, 8th graders will be separate. They have separate bathrooms, they have a separate cafeteria, they have a separate hallway for classrooms. They will have to go into the main building, obviously, for music classes, for phys ed classes, that sort of thing. Yeah, so they are, for all intents and purposes, separated.
How about the offices, like the offices that are here at Max, will they need to be relocated?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The administration offices here will just return back to the former administration offices that were constructed for that purpose. Special ed will also be there, and our director of curriculum instruction will be there as well. Warren Street has room to house a director of technology and our future director of transportation, which we need to talk about a little bit more. We've got to flesh that conversation out still.
Have you heard any feedback from like the underclassmen, the 11th grade or lower grades, in regards to the reopening of Max, of how they feel about it, or are you doing?
Well, the feedback I've heard really have been those students who are participating in the ad hoc committee. So we had Molly Courts and, I'm getting this wrong, is it the wrong group? Molly Courts and Jaden Alston.
Correct.
And so they were the two representatives from the high school, and they had positive things to say about the configuration themselves. I think along the way, others didn't necessarily have. Did I get the group right?
You did.
I did, good. We've got students on every ad hoc day.
Is it your belief that this is the most sustainable option? Because I know there's a lot of fatigue in the community about grouping and relocation. So I just want to confirm that you believe that this is the solution that will prevent that from happening anytime in the near future again?
Yes, I'm firm with this, just based on the amount of work we've done talking about it. Our buildings are full again, believe it or not. I don't know, but we filled this building is probably the fullest of all, housing 3 grade levels, which was originally constructed to do. All of our elementary schools are full, but they do have a little swing space, which is really important for expansion. So we're putting that into the mix. We have expansion potential for special education classrooms, which is an emerging need and one that we really have to consider as well. So, Marge, yes, I believe wholeheartedly that this is the way to go. I went back and forth about some different configurations, but never once did I go back and forth about opening the house, as a building. But the teacher's input was compelling, I thought. And it makes sense for us to have a primary school, an intermediate school, a middle school, and a high school. It does. And I don't foresee us changing grades. Once we get this under our belts, I'm sure we'll make visits. There's 2 other schools in the state that have this very same configuration. I've already talked to the superintendents. And if we could have the perfect world, I don't know if we put 8th grade where it's got to go, just to be honest with you. But we're doing our best to make that work well. Long-winded, but there's a lot behind it.
So next we have the budget workshop and the program component, and that is also.
Sounds good. And if the audience doesn't mind, I'm going to speak to the board mostly directly, so pardon my back. But I want to take the board through. Let's see how we do this. Can you hear okay back there? If you need to. All right. Yeah, of course. Direction of my voice. I think a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So the budget, as we have it this month, we have covered the format of the budget. We've covered the administrative component of the budget. We've covered the capital component of the budget. We're on to the last and biggest and probably most important part of the budget, which is the program component. I put all these slides in, as you know, as I always tell you, to remind ourselves about why we're doing what we do. And we even talked in budget, audit, budget, and finance committee about goal 5, which I think you're on page 5, I think. I'm urging the board at its March 9th workshop to take a look at some of its goals to make them more appropriate to what we're actually presenting in a budget. I think goal 5 is a good one, but I'm not sure if it articulates perfectly what we are doing or need to do. We'll keep it in there for now because that's what we're doing. Let me move on to the draft expenditures. Now, to put draft expenditures in place is a little cart before the horse, but this gives you a summary of what we're actually looking at in our budget. The administrative, program, and capital components, each of their spending plans in the light purple vertical rectangle. We're looking at a $42,222,306 budget, which is about $1.2 million increase, or 2.93% increase. Last year's budget at this time was a 2.63% increase from the year before. We're really trying to stay between that 2 and 3% increase. Most of that's all due to salary and benefits, to be honest. But that is a summary of where we are. It's important to note, I think, to point out, you all know this, but the administrative component change in percentage, that 2.04, that's just year to year in that particular component. And some people do the math and they come up with the wrong percentage point, but we're not going to do that. The total budget to budget year to year is 2.93% increase for $1.2 million. So the anticipated revenue is what we expect to pay for this budget and how we propose to pay for the budget through state aid. We're going to experience about a 2.5% increase over last year, or $633,300. This is very conservative still. We still don't have the legislative numbers. These are based on government numbers and what we know best about the state aid we are getting. Federal aid, we never see an increase in federal aid. The grants that we receive from the federal government cover special education, they cover Title I, Title IV.
Title 2
2,
and 4.
thank you, 2 and 4. And they really never increase. There is an increase to the pre-K. We're looking at a tax levy increase. My strong recommendation is to maximize our tax levy, which is 4.47% with a simple majority. and that is a little bit lower than it was last year. I believe it was 4.84 last year increase. Appropriated fund balance, in other words, how much from our reserves and fund balance are we actually taking to pay for this budget? And you can see over the past couple of years how that's gone. We really have tried to decrease it some each time. I don't believe ultimately it's best practice to fill the gap between expenditure and revenue using your fund balance. However, we do have it and we should use it, but we need to be careful because all of that fund balance is carefully planned through our reserve fund. We have an interfund transfer. That interfund transfer, is this one for food service? Oh, this is the Janssen sale. So our interfund transfer we see there is directly attributed to the Janssen sale and debt service. We're carrying for that, and any other revenue. Do you want to speak to the other revenue? 1.6.
So the 1.6 is really those other miscellaneous revenues that we can pull. You know, we have a BOCES refund in terms of when they close out their books. A lot of times we're issued a BOCES refund that's included in our miscellaneous revenue. We might have scrap metal, we might have auctions that we do, interest and earnings on accounts. So it's all those other categories that don't have a specific major category are moved into the other revenue categories. And that's pretty consistent year to year too. For this slide, the difference in our pilot amount, so it's pilot agreements is also included in the other revenue.
And our rentals should be.
Our rentals are in there as well.
So a little bit, driving a little deeper on the state aid, just to remind you that state aid is a little complicated, and it's early in the process to know exactly what we're going to have. But right now, what we're anticipating is that our expense remains, in other words, what we spend with BOCES and we get back the next year. That's just an example of expense remains. Our foundation aid is about a 3% increase, according to the governor. Which is a nice increase. We've traditionally gotten sometimes none, sometimes 2%. This year's we're anticipated to be 3%. And if the legislators go along with that, we'll be in pretty good shape. But the changes are there. Foundation aid carries this district quite a bit. The excess costs is typically what we spend in special education. And we are not anticipating a change in that right now. I think we do a nice job budgeting for expense aids, excess costs, because we never know what the needs of students are going to be year to year in special education. And a lot of times these are outside placements, these are not inside of school or high cost. And as far as instructional resources, that's always a very modest, increase. And that must be textbook aid, software, library. Those aids, we really argue the state really need to increase. We were thinking back to the time when we didn't have Promethean boards. We didn't have the technology that we have now, a one-to-one computer program. They still haven't increased the amount per student yet. So that's a huge expense that the district has that we need to sort of advocate for increasing at better pace. So total state anticipated revenue, it's about 2.5% over last year. I go into explain this a little bit further here, which I'll do again, so I won't bore you with that right now. The draft budget components, we are at the program portion, which is just under 3/4 of the budget. And here we are at the program. So the program, again, is all the teaching academic subjects, all the core subjects, transportation, special education, library, media, data, material supplies, all this stuff, and the important people that spend time with our kids in the classroom. Includes salary and benefits. So here we are looking at the program components, instruction, which is obviously the largest portion of that. We're looking at a $569,402 increase, almost 3% change, attributed directly to salaries and benefits. District transportation, which we are always aided on, you're looking at that number, about $100,000 change. We do have the transportation discussions ongoing, but we're not anticipating any rate change for next year. If we do change, we're going to make that change in 2024-25 school year. Employee benefits, I kind of misspoke. Benefits are they're spread throughout the budget, throughout all the components, but in the program, we're seeing a 2.66% increase. Overall, program, it's understandable. Salary and benefits, 2.68% increase makes complete sense to us. Pretty conservative, again, no fancy stuff in this budget, in this component, I should say. Just to drive deeper a little bit into the instructional spending, if you look at that's almost $20 million of our budget. Regular school, which is all those teachers and instruction, students with disabilities, is a huge component of that instructional component. Media and education technology, student service and activities, just gives you a breakdown of what is included in instruction. Is there anything you want to say about that, Alicia? Before I move on? There are a few increases that we thought would be important to explain. Again, these are fairly modest increases in comparison. Salary items, non-salary items, employee benefits all go up by contract, by rate set by insurance. Total program, that's our increase by $100,000. Surprisingly, big ticket. And Johnson had about 20% of the staff. So whatever it would be included in the program is the transportation safety plan. We already went over this with our audit budget and finance committee, but this purchase plan for next year includes the purchase of 2 buses. Our original plan had 3 buses, but with the electric buses, legislation coming on, what is that, 2024, we have to start?
We have to start and we have to be fully implemented by, it's 2035, but we have to submit an action plan next year of how we're going to begin our bus purchase replacement schedule to go zero emissions beginning in 2027. So we have to take a hard look at our fleet and make some decisions about it.
So not to purchase too many, gas powered buses, because we know that's coming. Also, we do use land reserve for capital transportation to fund these buses. We contract with HFM buses, as you know, to provide our transportation service, but the aid back on that the following year is 90%. And, the safety record of HFM has been pretty good. The service record, on the other hand, has been somewhat contentious at times. And I'm just going to say it in public because everybody knows it. But the thing is, we've had conversations recently about what do we do with our transportation services. Options are, do we do nothing? Do we stay with buses? Do we take our buses back? Do we take our drivers back? Or do we go out for a public or private entity to help us with transportation? Those things are still being discussed, and I think we've kind of reached a recommendation, but there's a lot more at play there. And so 2 buses rather than 3 is just a more conservative step. And we have to ask the manufacturer to start making these buses. I think that already happened, didn't it?
It did. We are going to be lucky to receive a mid-next September delivery of these buses. So we had to begin conversations even earlier this year than we would normally. So that is underway.
And it'll be fun when we get to electric buses too, because from what I understand, the manufacturers have 1. Well, the major manufacturer has 1 bus, and there's 700 students. I'm not excited. Going to move on. We already said 90% of what we spend in transportation, whether it be bus drivers, buses, fuel, transportation facilities, leadership, And a bus is right now around $160,000. And once we get paid back on that, it's about $16,000. This is a representation of our plan, which will change. And just as a summary, we're looking at a draft budget. Again, that total budget at this point in time, $42,222,306. State aid, you can see, proposed tax levy, other budgeted revenue, and then the use of our appropriate fund balance and reserves. And these are just slides ahead of time. This is where we're heading into May. Things will evolve. I don't expect them to evolve very much, but I think what you're looking at tonight is pretty much what we'll see next month, unless we see some changes. I don't anticipate. Maybe in April, we might see a little bit different from state.
Dr. Fraser, the next presentation, could you delineate the additional positions that you're hoping to add into one of these slides?
Of course, yes. Hold on, let me see if I can. I would always do that, by the way. I always have a slide. We're not quite there yet.
I understand that.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. You know, a lot of the positions we have currently are paid for through the ARP grant, the extra positions. And we do have a few budgeted positions in this particular budget, but I'll make sure I explain that really carefully. So audit budget plans, personnel, and margins. Just looking here. You know, one of the things I think the board should feel proud about is that we have increased our social, emotional, and academic learning staff. In this budget, we did account for an additional psychologist for another school opening up. We do have a social worker in each building except for the high school. Anything else I'm forgetting?
So, and these are all grant funded, so a school counselor type position as well. So there's 3 new positions for the SEAL team to spread out between the new configuration for next year. But many of these are grant funded for our ARP for next year. So we're not incorporated into the dollars for the general fund. And we've also put in for another school nurse, so that assist with our youngest learners, but also be available for coverage needs as well for the districts. But they are all grant funded for next year.
Is there a way to get a social worker for the high school?
I think it's in the best interest of the school district. I don't know if it's an expense we can pay.
It is at the high school,
Oh, the social workers at the high school?
not at PA.
Not at PA,
It's
thank you.
shared at PA.
But we thought about it, social worker in each building bed, but it's just not something we feel like we can budget.
I'm working on it.
I think we all feel like without any other questions, noted?
It doesn't include the SRO, because that's still in discussion.
That would still be grant funded, then we would have to find a way to budget that following. But for next year, you know, in my opinion, and we're moving to that next, but is Chief Gilbo here? We would fund that through the ARP funds, and it would be a good test, I think, to see if that's those who want to go. We do have to incorporate that into the general passage. I can talk a little bit about that too.
Any other questions or discussion?
With that, the next we have a guest speaker, and I will leave it to Dr. Frank.
We have I can spend, we want to go to SRO conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That was the natural next step. So school safety and the SRO, the reason you're seeing this presentation, board members, is because the SRO, when talk of an SRO, we can flesh it out tonight. Chief Gilbo came tonight with his perspective and his background on school resource officers. And for my part, Alicia is really in charge of the safety charges here in the district. We put this into one holistic kind of presentation because I want you to realize that it's not just about the SRO, it's one piece of the puzzle. School safety includes planning, preparedness, prevention, training, response, and recovery. It's kind of a multifaceted approach. And we have been doing quite a bit of planning and preparedness. We've been training staff. We put a lot of work into our safety plans. We're required to have plans, but I think what's in our plans is quite useful and quite good. We have district safety teams. We have safety teams in each building as well that meet regularly. As far as planning preparedness, there's a plan for lots of different types of emergencies, violence threats, bomb threats, etc. There are many, but just to name a few. We use here in the district what most districts use, a shell card or shelter in place, hold in place, evacuation, lockout, lockdown. These are practice drills that we do. We're required to have 8 fire drills or evacuation drills and 4 other drills. I don't know if I call them fire drills in the future. I think we call them evacuation drills. And we just got done talking about how we're working to employ more of those social and emotional support folks, psychologists, behavioral specialists, social workers, school counselor. This SEAL team includes school counselors. That's the academic piece in the SEAL acronym, to develop these positive relationships with students, address behaviors and situations in and outside the classroom. Training includes assessing threats, assessing crises, assessing the needs of students, looking at student behaviors and mental health issues. And the SEAL team meets regularly, as do crisis response teams, and we do assess threats on a regular basis. We have some, I think, really compelling data which I'd like to share with you at the March 9th workshop as well, around our SEAL efforts. So we work really closely with the Johnstown Police Department in all of this work. Sometimes the police, has come as the first responders for some of the crises. But I'm happy to say that relationship is fluid, it's strong. We're fortunate because we have a police force in town. We get a lot of information from the outside of what's affecting our students inside of our police force. And I think the SR conversations carry that one step further. Training, I just want to go through this next slide. The training that we go through, much of it's mandatory. Dignity for All Students Act, sexual harassment, discrimination, and so on. We're offering on March 9th the same night as your workshop, the Citizens Preparedness Training. That's something Alicia put together with, who else do we want to give credit to?
Fulton County Emergency Management with Stephen Santamaria. And it's actually a training offered by New York State Office of Emergency Management along with Homeland Security. And they offer it to communities to be better prepared in the event of any type of emergency, whether it be man-made or natural disaster. So we'll give out some nice kits that night. They'll answer any questions that the community has. So, that's the other piece to the puzzle is how do we help support our communities in being prepared in the event of any type of emergency that may happen. So it's the first time we're sponsoring.
Yeah, this is a really good thing, and I know that BOCES has helped us by inviting all public communities and schools to this, and we're trying to be a leader in this regard. Building safety teams, I think I mentioned that we have a district safety team. We all meet regularly. These aren't just namesake teams. Prevention and training, our building security systems. I know we've talked on and off about what we've done in the last couple of years to strengthen our building access points, single points of entry for visitors, camera systems, door access control. Some of this is still yet to be done because we're behind in getting this squared in. We're looking at rapid visit management system. That's something that's still up in the air, but it's another mechanism we can use when people come and sign into buildings to ensure students and staff safety. We're looking at something called a TAP app, so stay tuned to that. That's a mobile alert communication, kind of an anonymous reporting system, and of course, parents were valuable to us. I think I'll move on to this too. And get right to the safety, the school resource officer, because I would hope that you have plenty of questions when you talk through this, but this is not up for proposal for board consideration or vote tonight. It's not. But this idea of a resource officer, they would be a member of the district building safety teams, crisis response teams, student review teams when necessary. This is a trained law enforcement officer from the JPD, and they would be helping us in the development of our safety plans as well. We hope to promote safety around in the school. School resource officers can be seen as a deterrent, but they can be seen as lots of other things as well. The roles include developing those relationships with students and staff, serving as a liaison between school and law enforcement, but really, I think more than we have now. I think it's very good now, but if we have a liaison who knows our children better, who's in the building each day, knows our staff, knows our parents, they're highly trained, and can provide training. They have their own training and certification requirements as well to be in an education setting. They just don't put anybody into a school. They're trained properly to be that person. Sometimes they can be in uniform, sometimes they are in more plain clothes. So we could have an agreement with Just on Police the City where we would pay the salary, which is about $60,000. The city is willing to pay the benefits for this person. And I don't quote me cheap, but I think it's somewhere in the realm of $25,000 to $30,000. Something like that. So, and of course, we would work with the JPD to select the SRO and make sure that they're the right fit, because that's really important as well. This is kind of where I want to leave it. Now, I didn't give you a lot of background information because I think you've done some of your own research. You've read in the paper. You know that schools, we're one of the only schools that do not have a resource officer at this point in time in one of our buildings. And Marge and I had a little conversation about it, and it's controversial in some ways. But I thought Chief Gill was here. Hopefully, he can help answer some questions, and you can have a discussion among yourselves and us together about why. I personally believe it offers a peace of mind to the community, to having someone in our buildings who know our students and staff quite well. I think that's an added benefit I think well on this presentation. So, I don't know, I think we should just open up for some questions. Is that okay?
Yeah. I'd love your questions.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about the additional training that resource officers get?
Yes, they go through the state accredited school resource officer program that exposes them on the educational level. We here in Johnstown get a lot more with special needs than most other communities, so I know that's part of it. We've done that issue with lessons and housing that is in our jurisdiction. So a lot of that is just going through what they're going to follow, and obviously Captain Johnson will be the person in charge of the program. The actual last two persons that have been in the school, myself and him, mine was 99 and 2001. He was 2009 to 2011. What's changed a lot now is.
Can we say that again? I don't know if everybody's aware that we had a school resource officer here for a couple of years.
Yes, but first, it was right after our juvenile officer got shot during Memorial Day parade. When he was out, when I came to Johnstown, it was in '94. And in '99, I was promoted to juvenile officer. And that was my job, was going to Knox, going to the high school and making rounds and just checking to make sure things are good. The difference is when we train officers as a juvenile officer, they also send people to probation. They send refer cases to the family court. That's not what the SRO program is for. The SRO would basically make referrals. If it's a violation of the law, he makes a referral to our juvenile division, which is our detectives. They would actually prosecute the case for us and probation and all that. If it's a school issue where it's a violation of say school policy, they would refer it to the administration, and it's up to the school administration as far as what the discipline is. We will not get involved in that issue as far as, obviously there's rules and regulations and there's things that are against the law. So it's mainly to allow people to meet officers, have an interaction, and have a conversation that they may not have had before. I know we both have mentioned numerous times, it's probably part of our job, because we got to be around other students and living out at a level, instead of I'm here just because mommy and daddy are fighting for. I'm here because my house got broken into. It's a whole different setting. So, and we work very well with the principals that are here. We have general conversations all the time. We provide access to the school that you might not have, as far as we know if there's family problems at home. We know if there's a death in the family, because we've been involved in those cases outside the school setting. So we could make a phone call and say, hey, so you know, I heard he's acting up in school, this is what's going on at home, and then try to work together to come up with it. Our main goal of this SRO program, since we'll be starting it up, is I want to stop any problems before they happen. So if we can, talk to school council, talk to probation, talk to whatever the students have a problem with or issues with, then that is the key, because that way we can use all resources available. And in the past, there's always been a communication problem. The school can't say certain things, we couldn't say certain things, the assessor couldn't say certain things. Everything that's going on in the country, people are starting to realize that that cannot happen. Because every time there's a school shooting, every time there's an incident, everybody knows that student, everybody's not shocked. They're just wondering what took so long and why we didn't do something earlier. And that's what we're trying to get to. So there's a lot of kids, when I was juvenile officer, I used to make it real simple to standing in this auditorium to the incoming students for school was, it's either the kid's problem or the parents in the home like this is the problem. It's either A or B, and that's generally what it comes out with. And more times than not, it wasn't the student, it was the family. That's something we can deal with. That's something the schools don't have the authority to do. So that's where we can also assist. Same with truancy. We've gone before, if we get calls from somebody who just won't come to school or give his mom a hard time. We can, hey, you need to get up and we need to go to school. We can assist in things like that. So we're not going in, armed to the teeth like we're going to be, Gestapo in the school district. That's not what our goal is. We have subdued polo shirts, khakis that they can wear, or they can be in full uniform. So they will be wearing vests, they will be armed, and that's because otherwise you need to hire a retired police officer or something else in the community to be on armed security. Because if we're going to be they also have to be able to respond to whatever crisis happens. It could be medical, it could be weapons related, it could be anything. And in this day and age, it's something that never really was constantly thought of, but nowadays, it's they have to go out, they go out in the same uniforms. We will handpick the officers. It's not something that we're just going to open up to anybody. The administration, we know what this community is looking for, so I'm not going to send somebody to school who can't talk to people or doesn't get along with the kids, or we don't want to create any chaos. We're here to try to make that connection. So in the past, we've had detectives they've been called to the school for an outside thing, that they just, because they're in the school, and it's led to a large arrest. But it was all because of outside school activity, whether it's the bullying, whether it's the gang fights, whether it's, I mean, there's a lot that goes on that we deal with that the school's not always aware because it happens somewhere in Johnstown that's not in the school. So, is there any other questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering how you foresee a typical day, let's quote, of your officer interacting with the students. Because my perception of having a resource officer is, yes, for the safety of the students, you know, the community, staff, everything. But also at the same time, I'm wondering how you or your officers will make that connection to these students to not be a typical officer that you might come across as you are walking down Main Street. But how are you going to interact with the students, or what is the game plan to make that connection with the kids?
Well, I mean, obviously, if we're going to start with the school resource officer in high school. So we can sit down with Mr. Hale and say, okay, where do you want us in the morning? Because you've got people, there's three entrances now to the student shoot. So if you've got people there, then you can walk in the hallways. Just I was going, hey, you know, that was what we found back. And that's going back to 99 and throughout. It's still the same, because I've been to the school a couple of times and just walk through the building principals or walk through, you know. That's when the kids will come up to you. You have lunch periods. They can hang out in the cafeteria. I'm not saying they're going to sit down and lunch with everybody, but if they're just, you know, in the cafeteria, somebody just has a question for them, they can be around the gymnasium, they can be around any after-school activities, if they're, you know, some of the sports programs we've had officers assigned. Basically, if they work a night shift, they might go up for a basketball game as security or something else. So the school resource would also take the majority of that. So it's just they start seeing the same person and they know they can talk to them, they know they can say something.
I think Mr. Hill might be a good one to say something like this, but in my opinion, the school resource officers, wherever relationships can be built with kids. So that's, I think, why you mentioned games and cafeterias and, you know, arrival, dismissal, those sort of things. But I think there are a lot of prescribed places too, in ways that we.
Yeah, I mean, back, and again, I can only speak from my experience in school. I taught in a health class. We taught about bullying and the dating issues that were going on at the time, because once you put your hand in a locker or on the wall, okay, that's a lawful person to keep doing that. So that's statement speaking. You know, stupid things that as adults you forget when you were a child in high school.
Right.
So you're thinking, really, this is what the biggest, but it had a bigger impact than I even expected, to be honest with you. But it's something that we can teach. They had, when, you know, they first had a lot with the drugs and getting out of the DARE program. So I would go in and just speak about the drugs, and then the students would have to write an essay for English over what my presentation was to them.
I think for me in high school, they're experts in trauma and care, they're experts in de-escalation, that informal mentoring. So to have them there just to be informal mentors to kids is such a great benefit. You can push them into the classroom. There are so many opportunities and lessons for the kids to be able to collaborate with.
I'm sorry, but will we also have an opportunity to also bring the parents into this scope to have the interaction also with the officers, whether it be through like special engagements, you know, throughout the year or something along those lines? Because I'm just thinking, since we do have a pretty high numbers in regards to students that require, you know, special education and things of that nature, that we might need to get a little bit more. And believe me, I grew up in the 90s, I know exactly, you know, right. And I just don't, I totally agree with everything and understand, but I think maybe would there be a potential for also having that that family engagement expand that a little bit where we can then mold it to our needs of that moment.
Yeah, I mean, what's access would be, you know, obviously if it's a problem in after school, the SRO could notify the patrol officer on the street, hey, get a chance, stop by so-and-so's house. Just talk to mom, see what's going on. You know, we can do that. If there's a PTA meeting where we know we're gonna have, you know, a substantial amount of parents interested in something, then yes, the SRO could be there. Or, you know, we could easily agree the SROs prior, like, almost with the orientation, you know. And that's why I said there's a lot of areas I think we can improve on. We do a lot more now. I require officers more now to try to stop, get out of your car, walk around Main Street, get to know the business of them, walk around the malls, get to know the business of them. School's no different. They gotta get in, they get, you know. Some of the officers that I know mentioned in the past, and we have, our officers, besides the captain and myself, don't even realize this is going on right now. So we will be sending out an email and see, but we want somebody that is known by the school district, went to school here, knows what the issues are, knows the school, and can just integrate in and say, hey, you know, and that way it's a way for the teachers to relay some information. And again, it doesn't have to be criminal. It's just like, hey, just so you know, he's going through a rough time, or this one had a rough breakup, or whatever the issue is. And any time they get a chance to interact, then that's when we're going to do it. You know, they might see kids sitting alone at lunch and just sit down and talk, just have a conversation. And sometimes it's all they sat down before it knocks, sat down with kids, nobody was sitting around, and next thing you know, we have a kid sitting at the table because, you know, and just try to work them into a conversation. And, you know, to be honest with you, in my opinion, that's the biggest thing we're missing. Is, you know, the kids don't realize until you walk in the kids' shoes, stop making fun of what you don't know about, because you don't know what it is, you know.
I guess that's.
Take the time to learn it, and you get more from that person, and it'll be worth it.
I guess that's, I'm sorry, go ahead. Beth.
Sounds like a wonderful idea. I'm a retired teacher, so, will you be coordinating with the school social workers?
Yeah, we will basically, a conversation that Mr. Franklin and I have had, is we want to talk to Mr. Hale, we want to talk to the counselors, we want to talk to the nurses, you know, any other mental health professionals and whatever, and say, what would you want out of us? And that's, you know, but again, our officers, you know, most of them, they've been through the stop and fleet training. We have the equipment because of our joint SWAT team to do stop and lead and all the other things that we have done before in different years during the Superintendent's Day or something. We can offer that to teachers that are interested. We can offer to parents that are interested. You know, there's certain things that it might not be the SRO itself, but we'll bring in the ones who are certified to teach.
So in like thinking a little bit more broadly about this program, is there going to be an opportunity for the SRO to go into NACs and elementary buildings to build those relationships? Because certainly I would think that building the relationships earlier with law enforcement would be helpful before younger kids have, you know, those cemented ideas in their head about what a cop is and what they're doing and
I'm Derek Johnson, I'm the captain of the Johnstown Police Department. So the SRO program is administered through the New York State Juvenile Officers Association. It's very immersive in interaction between officers and children, officers and families, and that's why they now do the accreditation portion of SRO, or the certification for SRO. So yes, all the questions that meeting families, interacting with children. And you can see 100 examples on social media, but that would be the MBA. Of course, school safety is a concern, but the training is immersive in peer counseling, in report building. A huge part of any juvenile investigation, whether they're certified to be a forensic interviewer, or they're a juvenile officer, so they're dealing with juvenile crime, or they're a school resource officer. It's all based on relationship building, building trust within the community, showing the kids the different side of law enforcement, being immersive as part of the school administration, if that makes sense, where there's not so many walls. I've had a lot of good experience with Scott, Michael Beatty, Mr. Satterley. There tends to be that a much greater level of trust and information sharing, and the kids see it as well as the teachers, as well as the parents. So the program is geared that way, that's what it's for. Not so much a security program, but, a community program to benefit children in that you put an officer in the school, which statistically brings school violence from almost zero. And it helps in a lot of problem-solving issues on both sides of the fence.
And I think, Jennifer, to answer your question as well, is that if we move forward with the agreement, part of the process would be is we would coordinate with the city in terms of what that schedule looks like. So maybe it's a majority of time at the high school, but certain times spent in Knox and the elementary buildings, because we realize the significance in having that face time too at the younger grades. So we would coordinate what that schedule looks like, and that would be done in collaboration with the JPD on the agreement. And I think there's some other community nights we could do too. So if there's certain themed topics where we can invite students and families to, and have the SRO and possibly other members of the JPD, I think there are topics that we could do that would cover multiple schools. It would almost be district-wide events for that too. So that would be another opportunity to sort of have that, I think, that engagement experience too.
I have quite a few questions actually, but I'm trying to keep them brief. So this list of things that the resource officer would do to enhance the school safety program talks a lot about relationships and serving as liaison between the law enforcement and the school. The school currently does have access to the city's police force if they needed to by calling them. And a lot of the other relationship building things that I see on this list, I can see them being accomplished through social workers, counselors, and other support staff. And I'm not entirely convinced that that a resource officer is the answer to that. And if we want to talk about relationship building with police and law enforcement in the area, I'm wondering why we aren't exploring other programs like PAL that are funded, I believe, by grants and not necessarily through a school budget. I just think that $60,000 to add to the school budget down the line is a significant amount of money when we just talked about how we can't afford a social worker for Pleasant Ave. Another social worker for Pleasant Ave. Because I do think that a lot of the things that we're talking about here can be accomplished in the same preventative ways through support staff and social workers and counselors and psychologists.
I just want to address that last time about the social worker. I personally believe it's important to have social care in the building, but I think we've got to plan it just carefully. I haven't relaxed on that, but this is a different type of support, in my opinion, than the social work. It's just a different level of support, and so I wanted to address that. But we're missing another boat, and that is the law enforcement's tied to technology issues. Like, so much happens not in the physical space.
Yeah, we also have members of the federal crime and still the FBI staff force. We can also sign to that. We have a federal DEA agent basically assigned to that task force. So we have access to federal capabilities that normally we haven't had in the past and we do now. We have access to newer social media sites, some things that parents wouldn't even know what they've been talking about, that kids don't know on. So there's some of the things that come into play that we could, at that point, start sharing more information. But, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They're not going to be counselors. They're not going to name the senior point there. But what we have is also now in this day and age, I see that we've had a couple of fights with different schools, not just in our district, but also in the county, where the teachers are more of the hands-off and contact at all. The problem I have with some of that is this officer's not going to be able to do that. He will be hands-off to stop any violence that's there. So there's two kids fighting. I've seen video of one of them with high school age, where 4 girls would beat the crap out of one, use a taser, kick her in the face 3 times, those type of things are what we're primarily there to do. But that's not just, we're not gearing this, position as we're going to be here to, wrestle with kids all the time. No. But we have to put our hands on to get separated from the line of flight, so we're not going to have to do it.
So the officer would be authorized to make arrests in the school?
No, he would refer everything to the detectives. Our detectives work day shift. They will basically be a referral to, obviously they will retain kids. We've had to in the past, whether it's de-escalation moves or anything else. But, especially if somebody with special needs or something, at some point you do have to retain. Because you can't just let them keep throwing chairs and desks and everything else at teachers. So, yes, there will be time to do that, and then, once everything's calmed down, they would be handed off to investigators or patrol officers who will actually, outside of the school setting, need referrals for probation. Again, in the past, it's always been that person in the school, that was their primary position. We've changed it up a little bit, and I've seen and read is it's too difficult to be the bad guy to one or two students who have claim that they're going to hear what they have to say. And like I said, there's some kids that there's nasty behavior. There's also kind of health issues, but if we can forward them to get maybe the counselor to speak to them, or maybe a mental health person to speak to them, it might solve that issue where you see the other side of it. You know what I mean? So it's not just there for arrest. Trust me, we have enough issues outside of the school district that, we won't really focus on. But this is just something that, it's the first time in my 30-year career in Johnstown where I have a mayor and town council who are kind of not playing what you want. You pay it. That's basically that, and then it would start, that's how the conversation would start with down. We want to do what we can to build a closer knit and give extra set of eyes. If Mr. Hale doesn't even walk in the hallways because there's 16 other teachers that are doing it, and he's fine with that, but maybe at the lunch, the cafeteria or something, he wants to say, okay, well, we can focus on that, or the gymnasium, or the music, or the arts, wherever he can fit in and we can work him in to get any interaction. I don't need him sitting in an office staring at a camera. And that's what everybody thinks of it. That's why the person we pick, we know is going to make or break this program. And that's why he's working for the captain and captain only. Patrol sergeants, nobody's going to say, well, I said we did it. It's going to be man on only to get this off the ground. And like I said, eventually if we could, and I've had conversations with our council and there, if we can have a second one, to put and to say Knox or anything else, but again, that's something that was just reopening starting next school year, so that wasn't part of the initial conversation when we started all this. So, that would be excellent, because now the two SROs who can talk to each other, we have access to our records management system, we're putting in over 120 cameras right now throughout the city, so there's a lot of information they can get, whether it's kids after school, kids before school. We heard that this person we picked on coming to school. The transportation, we've had conversations of how we can utilize what we have in the city for cameras and everything else for potential bus stops or those type of things that, will help crossing guards that are a lot cheaper than, having some paid employees because they only work per diem. We have these different bus areas so they're not issues where you don't have to worry about kids getting, cars driving by, stopping, trying to lure them to a car or something of those nature. So, there's a lot of things we've been trying to do. This is just would be one piece of the puzzle. I think everybody kind of realizes that we put a lot of effort in a lot of things, and for us, the kids, we picked high school because that's the age that they're pretty much more attached to do some things. But the great, we'd like to start younger. I'm not a big proponent of having somebody constantly walking around like kindergarten, first and second grade. I think that's just a little bit of overkill because we don't understand what we're doing or anything else. Right now, now with the VOTEC criminal justice program, I have 3 interns coming for 2 weeks to do ride-alongs as part of the program. We got officers that with our department that have done that when they were in school in Johnstown High School, on the VOTEC, and then they went to FM, and then they went for an internship through FM. So, you know, it's just one of those things that the best case scenario is we can help out and get a lot of kids. We're not going to change the world, we realize that. We're not going to change everyone. Just so, you know, if we can reach 1 or 2 out of the 15 that might be causing trouble, then that's a win for us. Because if we're just minimizing more and more and you know, setting up behavior. So.
I want to say thank you
Okay.
for that, and you've given us a lot of information to take back and to discuss. I think that we do have a lot of questions, and I'm sure we will have a lot more.
Well, and like, I mean, we've had this conversation, obviously, just to get it started. I'll be more than willing to meet with anybody or as a group or whatever, you know, because we're more interested in what the school district is looking for also, to, you know, make sure that we can accomplish everything while we're writing what our, you know, duties and responsibilities would be for someone in that type of position.
In a nutshell, to my way of thinking, we have a good police department in our city, which we're really fortunate to have. It's what other school districts don't necessarily have. But to intensify or to richen the connection with an additional police officer. We're not talking about using the existing police force, but it would be additional.
Right, well, it'd be an officer that's existing now, but we will be hiring that as a separate position.
Yeah. And, you know, in no other place in our town or city do 1,500 kids come together every day and 270 staff members. And we need to assure them of their protection, and society is marching on. They're marching on in very scary ways at times, and we didn't spend any time talking about technology.
Yeah.
And I have to say that you would all agree probably that a lot of damage is done in the interwebs. Just kidding. On social media and in other places. And we don't have the expertise as a school to handle that, but the police department, the FBI, Homeland Security, they all have that expertise. And it's pervasive. It's pervasive in every one of our students' lives. So it's one thing that's affecting my opinion about this also. Okay. Thank you very much, Chief.
So next, we have comments from the public. Agenda or non-agenda items. The Board of Education welcomes district residents, parents, students, and other people in our to our meeting. Community involvement at the board meetings is encouraged so that we may better understand your views. Please be aware that individual student information or particular personal issues will not be discussed by this board during the public session. When recognized by this board president, please state your name and address. Statements are restricted to a maximum of 3 minutes, and the speaker will be notified by the board president when their time has expired. When speaking to the public, shall direct their comments to the public. The public shall direct their comments to the board and not to the district staff or other audience members. Speakers shall not expect board members to answer the questions during public comment. Questions shall be referred to the superintendent or his or her designee for review, study, and response. If appropriate, the board may request the issue to be discussed, to be a discussion item at a future Board of Education meeting or a Board of Education committee meeting. With that, is there any public comment? Seeing none, okay. We do not have no executive session, so we are going to go next to reports and superintendent. So we are going to move right to employee leadership and Ms. Litsicki with the JTA.
Good evening. Thank you for pulling up the presentation. Just as a review for anybody who was not here last month, each year the Johnstown Teachers Association designates funds in our budget to fulfill the requests of our members for additional material that will help to support their instruction, support their students. This year the JTA has provided grants to 7 members who submitted applications describing the initiatives or supplies that fell beyond the parameters of the traditional classroom supply budget set by the district. So I already covered a few last month, and this month I'd like to cover 2 more. We begin with Mrs. Whitman's self-contained classroom at Pleasant Avenue. Mrs. Whitman says, when you're feeling overwhelmed and just can't get it together, climb aboard. Thanks to the mini grant I received from JTA, my students now have a way to decompress. If they need sensory input but are reluctant to touch, they can just get what they need for themselves. Given a sensory break, students have returned to activities and celebrated success completing tasks as presented. It has reduced duration and quantity of outbursts, providing students a way to regulate their own bodies and emotions while being participants in the classroom. They call this a sensory boat. So, I mean, you can just see it just wraps right around.
Is it like a beanbag or full of air?
It's, you know, it's yeah, full of air.
And the boarding.
All right, now on the next slide, another special education teacher, Mrs. Peck, who teaches at Warren Street, was awarded a mini grant. And Mrs. Peck says, this year I received a mini grant from the JTA to purchase privacy dividers to use in my classroom at Warren Street. This classroom that I speak of is also known as room 22, the Sweet Suite, or between the hours of 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., it may sometimes be referred to as Warren Street's Grand Central Station. This space is shared as a shared classroom between all 5 of Warren Street's special education providers. As you know, Dr. Crenshaw was talking about space. There's a perfect example. As much as we love having the common space to plan and share ideas together, it quickly fills up with students learning and testing throughout the day. There are times when every chair at every kidney table is full, and up to 3 different lessons are being taught in different corners of the room. It didn't take long this year for our team to see that we needed to provide a way for students to work quietly or independently on a test or an assignment. The space restrictions in the Sweet Suite do not allow us to spread our students out, so these dividers allow our students to complete work successfully in a sometimes very busy location. My team and I are very appreciative of the JTA for providing these for our students to use. So thank you very much for allowing us to share a little bit more about our JTA mini grants. And the next report from JTA is going to be from Kristen Mishaw. She's going to talk a little bit about Odyssey of the Mind. And Odyssey of the Mind is a great example of the collaboration between the teachers union and the district. Both parties have really ardently cultivated this cooperation for many, many years. Quite a few years ago, there was an attempt to get Odyssey up and running in our district, and for a variety of reasons, it wasn't successful. Several years later, or several years ago, whichever way you look at it, Mrs. Mishaw, who was actually heavily involved in Odyssey and Red Almond Perth, proposed her vision for creating a highly organized, and if you know Kristen Mishaw, you know why I use those words, highly organized and sustainable Odyssey program here in Johnstown. So the district and the union were able to very quickly collaborate and quickly come to an agreement. This program has benefited hundreds of kids since its inception, and Mrs. Mishaw would like to share some details about the program with you tonight.
Hello, I'm Kristen Mishaw, and I am currently the advisor of Odyssey of the Mind. We have 10 teams this year participating in the program. 8 of those are at Warren Street, and 2 of them are at Johnstown Junior Senior High School. That's roughly 65 students who are in grades 3 through 12. There are also 19 volunteer coaches that are working with the program. We are excited to have the 2 teams that went to World Finals last year back in the program. And one is a group of seniors who are kind of in their last hurrah. We have teams of 5 to 7 students who have been meeting since October. and are now approaching their busiest part of the season. Students will work to solve one of 5 very complex problems and perform their solution in an 8-minute skit at competition. Team members create everything. The students are in charge of the storyline, the props, the scenery, the characters, the costumes, their lines that they're going to say, all while using teamwork, problem solving, and STEM skills, budgeting, time management, and creativity. The students will showcase their work at the regional competition next month. The tournament will again be held here in Johnstown at the junior senior high school. There will be 8 different school districts participating with 32 teams. We were at one point up to 75-ish teams, but unfortunately COVID really affected this program. So we're about halfway there, building it back up. Students that finish in first place at the competition and a few randomly selected second place teams will advance to the state finals in April. We have a couple important events coming up that I'd like to mention. On the evenings of March 7th and 9th, we'll be holding dress rehearsal nights at Warren Street in the gym for all the Johnstown teams to practice in front of an audience. Guests are welcome to come and watch. Our actual competition is a day-long event on Saturday, March 11th, as I said, at the high school, junior, senior high school. The performance will run from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a closing ceremony and awards following. All are welcome to come and watch the students perform throughout the day. We are back to a full competition. Guests are all welcome, and I personally would like to invite any of the Board of Education members who would like to come and stop by and check out the program in action. We hope to see some of you there, and I'd like to thank you for continuing to support this co-curricular program. Thank you.
When was the dress rehearsal again? You said this
Dress rehearsal, they are this the March 7th and 9th, Tuesday and Thursday, and roughly they're going to be running about 5 to 6:30 each night. We have too many teams to do it on one night. And then that coming Saturday, the 11th, it's an all-day thing. There are performances from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. And that will, the dress rehearsal is at Warren, the others at the junior senior high school competition. You're welcome. Thank you.
Deborah Jerry for CSEA.
Good evening to all. Deborah Jerry, CSEA representative, speaking tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted, my topic tonight is ready and willing. After the presentation that we had tonight on reconfiguration and budget, just a shout out to the board, the district, JTA, that is going to take a monumentous endeavor and teamwork for everybody to accomplish the goals that are set forth. And CSEA, along with everyone else involved, is ready and willing to do their part. And we'll all work together and we'll get through it. Change is good. Thank you.
Next, we have committee reports. First, we have academic and curricular report.
I can do that, yeah. So we met recently on the 7th, and we discussed that consensus had been reached regarding the next reopening, and the plan was reviewed. We've already reviewed that tonight, so I won't rehash that. Lots of moving will be beginning in March through July. We also talked about the athletics ad hoc committee, and that committee is doing a lot of good work. They did come to the consensus that they didn't want to recommend to cut any sports, and they did not want to do nothing. So that's some progress. Lots more to come with that. There was an update regarding transportation, and Dr. Cranshaw hit on that again tonight already, that perhaps the recommendation that we're looking at for 24-25 school year could be transitioning to a private carrier, etc. There was some other mentions of some centralized bus stops within city limits being looked at. Working with the police for crossing guards, just as Gilbo mentioned tonight. Perhaps